The history of the English language started with the arrival of three Germanic tribes, the Angles, Jutes, and the Saxons, who invaded Britain during the 5th century AD. These tribes crossed the North Sea from what is today Denmark and northern Germany. At the time, the inhabitants of Britain spoke a Celtic language, and these speakers were pushed west and north by the invaders, mainly into what is now Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. The Angles came from Engleland, and their language was called English, from which the words England and English are derived. Old English is an early form of the English language spoken between the mid-5th century and the mid-12th century. It is a West Germanic language, and only a few scattered inscriptions date from the 5th and 6th century, written in a runic alphabet which the invaders brought with them. The literary age began after the Roman missionaries, led by Augustine, who came to Kent in 597 AD. The chief literary work of the period, the heroic poem Beowulf, survives in a single copy and was written about 1000 AD. There are a number of other short poems, but the whole remaining existing work is very small, most of which was written during the reign of King Alfred, who ruled from 849 to 899, including the translation into Old English of Beda's ecclesiastical history from the Latin text written in 731 AD. Middle English represents the period of English language development from the 12th century to the middle of the 15th. In 1066, the Duke of Normandy conquered England and became William I. He brought with him a new social and linguistic era to Britain. The main influence on the English language was Norman French, and bilingualism flourished among the upper and merchant classes. The English language managed to survive, unlike the Celtic language in the Anglo-Saxon invasion, because it was too well established to be supplanted by another language. Several things happened to the English language during this period. Many new French words were adopted, increasing the vocabulary. The grammar changed by dropping off Germanic inflections or word endings. Word order changed, and new spelling conventions and pronunciations were adopted. Some of the most important texts in Middle English are the Ormulum in the 12th century, Wycliffe's Bible in 1384, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales in the 1390s, and the Morte d'Arthur by Malory in 1485. The era of early modern English is from approximately the beginning of the 16th to the beginning of the 19th century and spanned 10 monarchs. One of the most significant events during this period is when William Caxton brought the printing press to England in 1476. The English Reformation created a new English church which separated from Rome and eventually resulted in the King James Bible, written in English and printed with wide distribution. England, along with other nations, witnessed global movements such as the Renaissance, exploration and colonization, the American Revolution, and industrialization. Attempts were made to improve the language by adding vocabulary from Latin, French, and neologisms, or new words were added to keep up with industrialization. Spelling reform demanded consistency and documented acceptable use through newly available dictionaries. Scholarly books, including dictionaries and grammar books, switched from Latin to English. Literacy had never been so widespread. The English language experienced a phenomenon known as the Great Vowel Shift, which occurred between 1350 and 1700 and spanned the Middle and Early English periods. The impact of the Great Vowel Shift focused primarily on pronunciation and spelling. The main difference in pronunciation between Middle English and Modern English is in the value of the long vowels. The effect of the vowel shift may be seen clearly in the English names of many of the letters of the alphabet. A, B, C, and D before the vowel shift were pronounced A, B, C, D. By contrast, the names of F, L, M, N, and S remain the same between Old English and Modern English because the short vowels were largely unaffected by the shift. Middle English spellings were retained into Modern English while the great vowel shift was taking place, explaining some of the peculiarities of Modern English spelling in relation to vowels. Why the great vowel shift occurred is a mystery. One explanation is that the Black Death between 1348 to 1350 caused mass migrations to the southeast of England, and people had to modify their speech to be understood. The era of colonialism was carried out most successfully by world powers such as Spain, France, Holland, and England. England in the late 16th and 17th centuries was very active in creating dominions, protectorates, colonies, and territories, which resulted in the British Empire, and those lands and those people were administered by the United Kingdom. At its height, England was the largest empire in history and was the foremost global power for over a century. By 1922, the British Empire comprised over 458 million people, which were about 1/5 of the world's population at the time. The empire covered almost a quarter of the Earth's total land area. As a result, its political, legal, cultural, and linguistic legacy is vast. For several reasons, managing so much land and people became economically unfeasible for Britain after World War II, and in many cases England gave up their land claims. But the impact of their language created a base for World English. Today, the lingua franca, which means the language people have to know to conduct business, share research, or gain current knowledge around the world, is English. As a result, several different dialects have developed, increasing the way one can speak English. Dialects are linguistic varieties which differ in pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar from each other and from Standard English, which is itself a dialect. There are over 100 English dialects found all over the world today, so the journey of the English language goes on with you and your fellow English speakers. The story, as of yet, has not ended.